In the Chronicles of Narnia, written by C.S. Lewis, the second book that he wrote is The Horse and His Boy. And the story of Shasta, I find, one of the most inspirational stories I've ever read. What C.S. Lewis has done here is quite ingenious. He's going to share the story of a young boy, and I'm going to pick up that story quite a way through the book. It will make sense to you, and there's some valuable lessons that I think we can learn from what Lewis is doing here. So here we go, The Horse and His Boy. We're about 2/3 of the way through the book, and we pick it up with Shasta thinking to himself. "After all," said Shasta, "this road is bound to get somewhere. But all that depends on what you mean by somewhere." The road kept on getting to somewhere in the sense that it got more and more trees, all dark and dripping, and to colder and colder air. And being very tired and having nothing inside him, he felt so sorry for himself that the tears rolled down his cheeks. What put a stop to all this sudden fright? Shasta discovered that someone or somebody was walking beside him. It was pitch dark and he could see nothing, and the thing or person was going so quietly that he could hardly hear any footfalls. What he could hear was breathing. "Who are you?" he said, scarcely above a whisper. "One who has waited long for you to speak," said the thing. Its voice was not loud, but very large and deep. Are you a giant?" asked Shasta. "You might call me a giant," said the large voice, "but I am not like the creatures you call giants." "I can't see you at all," said Shasta, after staring very hard. Then, for an even more terrible idea had come into his head, he said, almost in a scream, You're not something dead, are you? Oh, please go away. What harm have I ever done you? Oh, I'm the unluckiest person in the whole world." Once more he felt the warm breath of the thing on his hand and face. "There," he said, "that is not the breath of a ghost. Tell me your sorrows." Shasta was a little reassured by the breath, so he told how he had never known his real father or mother, and had been brought up sternly by the fisherman. And then he told the story of his escape, and how they were chased by lions and forced to swim for their lives, and of all their dangers in Tashbaan, and about his night among the tombs, and how the beasts howled at him out of the desert. And he told about the heat and the thirst of their desert journey, and how they were almost at their goal when another lion chased them and wounded Arsheesh, and also how very long it was since he had anything to eat. "I do not call you unfortunate," said the large voice. "Don't you think it was bad luck to meet so many lions?" said Shasta. "There was only one lion," said the voice. "What on earth do you mean? I've just told you that there were at least two the first night, and—" "There was only one, but he was swift of foot." "How do you know?" "I was the lion." And as Shasta gaped with open mouth and said nothing, the voice continued, "I was the lion who forced you to join with Arsheesh. I was the cat who comforted you among the houses of the dead. I was the lion who drove the jackals from you while you slept. I was the lion who gave the horses the new strength of fear for the last mile, so that you might reach King Loon in time. And I was the lion you do not remember who pushed the boat in which you lay, a child near death, so that it came to the shore where a man sat, wakeful at midnight to receive you. Then it was you who wounded Aravis? It was I. But what for? Child, said the voice, I am telling you your story and not hers. I tell no one any story but his own. Who are you? Asked Shasta. Myself, said the voice, very deep and low, so that the earth shook. And again, myself, loud and clear and bright. And then the third time, myself, whispered so softly you could hardly hear it, and yet it seemed to come from all around you, as if the leaves rustled with it. Shasta was no longer afraid that the voice belonged to something that would eat him, nor that it was the voice of a ghost. But a new and different sort of trembling came over him. Yet he felt glad too. The mist was turning from black to grey, and from grey to white. This must have begun to happen some time ago, but while he had been talking to the thing, he had not been noticing anything else. Now the whiteness around him became a shining whiteness. His eyes began to blink. Somewhere ahead, he could hear birds singing. He knew the night was over at last. He could see the mane and ears and head of his horse quite easily now. A golden light fell on them from the left. He thought it was the sun. He turned and saw, pacing beside him, taller than the horse, a lion. The horse did not seem to be afraid of it, or else could not see it. It was from the lion that the light came. No one ever saw anything more terrible or beautiful. Luckily, Shasta had lived all his life too far south in Calormen to have heard the tales that were whispered in Tashbarn about a dreadful Narnian demon that appeared in the form of a lion. And of course, he knew none of the true stories about Aslan, the great lion, the son of the emperor over the sea, the king above all high kings in Narnia. But after one glance at the lion's face, he slipped out of the saddle and fell at its feet. He couldn't say anything, but then he didn't want to say anything. He knew he needn't say anything. The high king above all kings stooped towards him. Its mane and some strange and solemn perfume that hung about the mane was all around him. It touched his forehead with its tongue. He lifted his face, and their eyes met. Then instantly the pale brightness of the mist and the fiery brightness of the lion rolled themselves together into a swirling glory and gathered themselves up and disappeared. He was alone with the horse on a grassy hillside under a blue sky, and there were birds singing. This is an extract from The Horse and His Boy, written by C.S. Lewis. It's part of chapter 11, entitled The Unwelcome Fellow Traveller. So here's some life lessons I think we can draw from Lewis's clever writing, and oftentimes he is captivating readers with a great story, but underneath the story he's actually making a point. We can see some life lessons here about Shasta's encounter with Aslan. The first principle we might see is that life's setbacks are often God's closed doors. You realise that Aslan is representing Christ. He is the Christ in the Narnian stories. Secondly, God closed doors for Shasta that seemed to be painful, and God continues to do that in people's lives as well today. And then we see that God's open doors are revealed through his closed doors for people, and life's problems, closed doors, magnify your readiness and appreciation of open doors. What I haven't told you, and if you've read the book, The Horse and His Boy, you would know this, that Shasta, and at this point in the story, he doesn't know who he is. But obviously Aslan knew who he was. He was the rightful heir to the throne of Archenland, the neighbouring country to Narnia. And Aslan has protected him and kept him for this moment where he will be recognised and be brought into the palace where ultimately he would become king. He has brought Aravis, the young girl, along to meet with Shasta, and ultimately she would become his wife. It's a beautiful story that Lewis is telling us. And we see in this story that each of Shasta's closed doors turn out to be Aslan's open doors for him to ultimately arrive at the destiny that Aslan had for him. Aslan, as I mentioned, is a type of Christ that C.S. Lewis is using. And his story is a beautiful story of how Christ, sometimes it seems like he's closing doors, which are ultimately to prepare us for our destiny, our open door that he has for us. Lewis he shared these insights for two reasons. Firstly, this is partly his story as well. He also was aware of what the Bible had to say about how God dealt with people. And he understood that in the Bible, God gives people and nations new chapters all the time, including a new chapter for the nation of Israel. And then God also gave people new chapters, even when it seemed like, as Shasta had said, they had been very unlucky all through their life. And they had experienced setback after setback. And I think two of the greatest examples of this is Zechariah and Elizabeth and their new chapter, when it says, in the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah of the division of Abiah, and he had a wife from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking blamelessly in all the commandments and statutes of the Lord. But they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and both were advanced in years. And sometimes we can see that people have setbacks and things aren't going well, and we assume this is God's, withholding blessing from them, when in fact, biblically, it's often the other way around. This couple, Zechariah and Elizabeth, were godly and upright people. And then we see here in Luke continuing, now while he was serving as priest before God when his division was on duty, there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And Zechariah was troubled when he saw him, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John, and you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great before the Lord. I love that expression that the angel has said, your prayer has been heard. And Zechariah and Elizabeth would have been praying for decades for them to be blessed with a child. And you would think toward the end of their life, they had just about, if not entirely, given up any hope of seeing that prayer answered. But at the right time, the right door opens, and John the Baptist comes into the world. We can see also that Lewis was aware that just ordinary people whose names are not mentioned in the Bible, but the Bible tells us that anyone can have a new chapter begin with Christ. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 17 and 18 it says, "This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone, a new life has begun. And all of this is a gift from God, who brought us back to himself through Christ. And God has given us this task of reconciling people to him." So I mentioned this story of Shasta is partly C.S. Lewis's own story. At a young age, at the age of 9, his mother died of cancer. And then his father became distant from him, and it was a strained relationship through the rest of their lives together. And so he went off to boarding school where he was abused. His father had to rescue him out of that boarding school and put him with a private tutor. He then longed to become a poet. His first 2 works of poetry were not great successes, and so he felt he had failed. And he received a scholarship to go to Oxford. He went to Oxford, and ultimately he found that as his life at Oxford, he went on to become a tutor, that professionally he was scorned by many of his peers there. It seemed like things were not going well for him. But then, ultimately, God opened a door for Lewis that led him into great prominence and with a great ability to write well, and we've just read a portion of what he could do. And God brought him into his destiny. We could go on and see that Lewis also experienced more setbacks throughout his life. He married Joy Gresham, who 3 years after they were married, she died of cancer. And yet now, Lewis had this great confidence that God's plans are always good plans, and he brings great good from them. And so with this in mind, I just want to reflect on this, that no matter what you're going through, no matter what you've been through, when you surrender your life to Christ, when he intervenes in your life, a new chapter can begin. I trust that you might enjoy reading The Horse and His Boy and read the rest of that story, because it's a very inspirational story, part of the 7 books in the Chronicles of Narnia. Thanks for watching this, and if you could please give this a like and hit the notification bell, and if you're not yet a subscriber, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. God bless you, and I hope you can join with me again as we continue to look at some life lessons from the literature of C.S. Lewis over the next few months.